Good afternoon, class. Good to see y'all today. Welcome. This is the 6th week, I believe, of our course and first session in the 6th week. So I guess this is session number 11. Is that possible? 2 times 5 plus 1. This is 11. So the 11th class, and I've been putting recordings up on Blackboard, at least the link to these recordings. So I hope for those who aren't able to view in real time, I try to also leave my email up. I'm not sure I have it up at the moment here, but if anyone wants to chime in out there in real time. I don't know how many people are viewing, but hopefully everybody at least is watching the videos. With this upcoming exam, I want to make sure how shall I say? I want to make sure that there's a reward implicit anyway in your viewing of the videos and being here, so that you know what we've done in class. So some of these things we talk about, and I guess I'll say the things we talk about are more important than things we don't talk about you may encounter in the text. So just to say, want you to read the chapters, of course. Last time, after class, I posted some exercises for you, practice exercises on Blackboard. There's a goodly number of those, and I want to encourage you to do those. They will help you on the test, okay? I didn't just willy-nilly put a bunch of exercises up there and say, hey, do these, you'll be a better economist, okay? Let me tell you, tell you a little structure I have to work with our text. I'll be using a text bank a little bit, okay? In fact, significantly. So a lot of the questions on the upcoming test will be multiple choice. Perhaps all of them will be, but a vast majority will be drawn from that test bank. Well, those practice problems I gave you there, I posted on Blackboard, I drew from the test bank, okay? And so I know it looks like it may be overwhelming at first glance, the number of problems. I think there's on the order of 65 to 70 questions and problems there. There's 2 documents. Of course, you still have some time if you haven't started on those to begin. But I cherry-picked those for a reason out of the test bank, because they're adjacent to, okay, I go down the list and say, hey, that's a good problem. We've talked about that in class. And they're adjacent to the same problem that's algorithmically, the parameters are algorithmically generated, okay? So in other words, you get kind of a static problem. You could go online, I imagine, answer every one of these. None of this stuff from the publisher is outside of the public domain. So, I mean, if you want to work those problems that way, you can. There's not a whole lot of benefit. You'll see the exact parameter values probably. But I will pull a problem out of the algorithm problem. I'll take the algorithm problem and put that on your test. Okay? So it's to reward you for going through those questions. Now, I believe I didn't put any questions on the first part of Chapter 6. We drew the line. I'll draw the line. I'll go ahead and tell you that as far as this upcoming test goes, what we did last week will kind of cap what you need to know. That is to say, the first part of Chapter 6 is Unit 1, which is down to the bottom of page 119, okay? Today we're going to talk about some Unit 2 material, then we'll begin kind of a review for the test, okay? But I want to go ahead and continue in Chapter 2, but the rest of, Chapter 6, but the rest of Chapter 6 will be in Unit 2. And the reason I do that, okay, I could test you on this material too, but I like to draw things up a week in advance of the exam date, okay? So everybody's got plenty of time to go back through. I'm not hitting you with new material, and we can do this material today. We can do this on the next exam. Now, I'll be reviewing some concepts we talked about last time, obviously, but we'll talk about other price elasticities today, and this will be on the Unit 2 exam. So, so at any rate, I hope all that seems fair, and I hope there's an encouragement for you to get into the problems that I've posted. The homework also, at this point, all of the homework that's been posted is fair game for the exam. I could add another problem or two that is from this first part of Chapter 6. I might do that after class today. Wouldn't be much, but just to reinforce again those concepts that you'll see on the exam. Now, I have decided also to extend the exam window. Okay, so again, instead of Friday, it would be open Friday and Saturday. Your exam will be open Friday and Saturday, and you'll take the exam at a time of your choosing. Just whenever you feel like it'll probably be a 90-minute exam, and you'll just go on and take that exam, so forth. I'm told that we have a proctoring system available, so I'll have more detail on that. It shouldn't be a big deal for you to navigate that, but I don't have any more information on that today. Okay, so yeah. All right, so last time we began Chapter 6, got into Chapter 6 talking about price elasticities. There's other elasticities. So really, this is the only chapter, as far as I know, that has a one-word title, elasticity, okay? And sometimes people talk about elasticities, and they're not precise in their description there, so we may not know what kind of elasticity they're talking about. So when you say, hey, that's an elastic good or elastic service, something like that, you kind of have to put a little more with it. And so we mentioned this last time. So just want to make sure we're kind of all together on this, and then we're going to get into price elasticity of supply. I'll tell you what, let me go to the to the PowerPoint if we can, Radar, and then I've kind of made some of these slides for today. Last time it kind of shook me up a little bit. I realized the document camera is not always that reliable, so if we can go, I'll be using it though some here, but if we can go to the PowerPoint slides, that would be great. Is that possible? Okay. If not, I'll have to do a chalk talk, I guess, again. All right. Okay, great. All right, thank you. Okay, so here's the Chapter 6 topic. So we got into the first one last time. So price elasticity of demand. I'll review that here in a second. We're going to talk today, we're going to go on to the total revenue test. Then we'll talk about determinants of price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, and then what's called the cross elasticity and income elasticities of demand. All right, so price elasticity, let me just go to this slide next. Now I've posted some slides on Blackboard that are very similar to these, but technically they're not the same, okay? So I'm trying to abide by copyright rules, and it gets to be a little constraining. I'm not sure what to do about that. But at any rate, if you've got those slides available to you, and they've been up for a while for Chapter 6, so they should be on Blackboard. All you have to do is pull those down off Blackboard. Let me know if you can't find any of the materials that I've posted. I have put up PowerPoint slides for each chapter and a few other helps there on Blackboard. But at any rate, you'll see this definition there, and we looked at this last time. The price elasticity coefficient, or price elasticity of demand. Now that word order is very important. I mentioned this last time. When you just throw the word elasticity out there, it really by itself doesn't mean anything. This is the price elasticity of demand. So there's three words there, okay? The pivot word is elasticity, but the word that goes before it will tell you what the cause variable is. I think I actually wrote that on the board last time. We circled, what is the cause variable? What is it that is changing the situation? So if you talk about price elasticity of demand, it's a change in price is going to affect something. And the effect or result variable is quantity demanded. When you say price elasticity of demand, we'll have income elasticity of demand, where the cause variables to change in income, okay? Or we'll have price elasticity of supply, where, say, the result variable is a quantity supplied, not the quantity demanded. So I want you to kind of get the word order down, because if you're not precise with the language, then you wind up calculating something you don't need or want or can't use. So at any rate, now, so what this is, it tells you in the numerator the quantity demanded, how that responds to a percent change in the denominator. So really the value of E sub D tells you how the quantity demanded is affected by 1% change in the price, be it going up or down. So if you had a price elasticity of demand of 3.0, that would say that ratio is 3 to 1, right? So that would say for a 1% change in the price of the product X, there's a 3% change in the quantity demanded of that product. And so the price elasticity of demand, technically speaking, if you take a higher level econ course too, I just say that a lot of times they'll leave it as a negative, but we struck the negative off. We know that fraction, technically speaking, would always be negative, because prices and quantity demanded move in opposite directions. So you strike the negative off, since you always know that. And so the range of values for E sub D are positive values, either greater than 1 or less than 1, or on occasion they could equal to 1. So we had a slide, let me just go down here just a second, we had this slide here. So if the price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, we say that you have an elastic demand. There's really price elastic demand, okay? And then if it's greater than 1, it's price elastic. If it's between 0 and 1, it's inelastic. There's these extreme cases here that we talked about last time, like for instance, the perfectly inelastic. We talked about that. Now, if you look there closely, it says E sub D is 0. Why is that? That's perfectly inelastic. Okay, if you choose any 2 points on that curve, okay, and we go back to this formula back here, whoops, you'll see that the numerator has to be 0. Okay, you got a vertical line. If you think about that just a second, the quantity demanded on a vertical demand curve, the change in quantity demanded is 0. So because there's a 0 in the numerator, here we go back again to this picture here, a vertical demand curve, it has a coefficient of price elasticity equal to 0. Okay, because the numerator is equal to 0. Now for a horizontal line, the denominator is equal to 0. Okay, so we all know that, you can't have a problem if you divide something by 0. How many times will 0 go into 5? Well, it'll go in an infinite number of times. So this is a perfectly elastic demand will have a elasticity equal to infinity. Okay, so I'm just skipping around here just a little bit. This should look familiar to what we talked about last time. We used the midpoint formula generally to find the price elasticity of demand between 2 points on a demand curve. Actually, that's called the arc elasticity. Just if you encounter that somewhere, there's another way to calculate this. But this is pretty good when there's not a big change in the price. Okay, so this is the formula we're working with. It's really equal to the percent change in the quantity demanded divided by the percent change in the price. Okay, so remember what we have here is a unit-free measure. The percentages drop out. I mentioned that last time. And we can compare various products by their price elasticities of demand. For instance, let's just go here. Well, I'm sorry. Let me skip to a slide. There's your book, gives you a table. It's just going to take me a second to find it. And your book gives you a table of various price elasticities of demand. I think I have that here. Yeah, let me just scoot on down here. All right. Okay, so this is in your text. Okay, I didn't pull this out of your text. I don't know if you can see these or not. Kind of hard to see, perhaps. But they got newspapers has a price elasticity of 0.1. electricity and bread. Okay, when you look here, I just want to point a few things out, generally speaking. Cigarettes and so forth, bread. Okay, for one reason or another, these goods that have a low price elasticity of demand are things you got to have. Okay, so you got to have. In other words, your quantity that you'll demand will not really be affected by a change in price. Okay, so we'll talk about those determinants in a minute, but I'll say, for instance, if you're a cigarette smoker, you're hooked on cigarettes. Okay, it's because of the addictive nature of cigarettes that it's a very inelastic, price inelastic good. Okay, it's because of its addictive nature. We're going to see some results, some other surprising results about the price elasticity of demand for illegal drugs here in a minute, okay, that stem from that. But these goods in the first column, for the most part, that have a price elasticity less than 1 are things you feel you got to have, or you don't care how much you spend on them anyway because they're a low portion of your budget or something like that. They're kind of considered necessities, at least for the price that's being charged. On the right, you'll get down here to some luxury items on the right. So certainly beef, china, glassware, tableware, residential land, restaurant meals, okay, lamb and mutton, fresh peas. Notice each of these greater than 1. Okay, those are very price elastic goods. So a little tweak in price, a little bump up in price will really diminish the quantity demanded. So now, so then what are the determinants for these price elasticities? Okay, so let me, pardon me here while I scoot around here. Okay, let me go back here. I want to do this in a little different order. We'll come back here in a second because here we go. The more substitutes there are for a product, the more price elastic the product. Okay, so if the price of T-bone steak goes up by 10%, I mean, there's a lot of other things I can eat than T-bone steak, right? So you can eat chicken, you can eat pork, you can eat, pork chops. I just seen that pork chops as T-bone steak and so forth. So if there's something, say, in the beef industry that causes beef prices to skyrocket this year, maybe as you know, there was a drought or something that affected that. And drove up the price of beef, T-bone steaks included. Well, heck, most of us can find something else to eat. It's not a have-to sort of thing. So the more substitutes, all these substitutes for beef, the more price elastic is the good. I hope that makes sense. And so luxury items in particular generally there's lots of substitutes for luxury items. So if we're thinking theater tickets here, or if we're thinking cruise tickets or what have you, those sorts of things are very price elastic. Secondly here, the higher the proportion of the income, the more elastic is the demand. Price elastic is the demand. So here's another one. I keep using table salt as an example. But if the price of table salt doubles overnight, boom, man, I mean, that's going to affect you a lot more than if the price of your apartment rental doubles overnight, okay? That's a big difference there, right? So the price of your Morton salt, I don't even know how much of that I use in a year, but I use a little bit, heck, got to have that. And but I probably don't consume a whole canister of that in a year. Probably my family doesn't, I don't know. So no big deal, it's a small portion of our budget. But things that are a larger portion of your budget would be different. Okay, so motor vehicles, beef, residential land and so forth. Those things are very price elastic because if you buy any of that stuff, it's going to be a high proportion of your demand. So you see a correlation here really. Things that have lots of substitutes generally are priced cheaper anyway, and there's more, they're more elastic. So these things kind of go together. Luxury goods are more price elastic than necessities. Okay, so lamb and mutton and fresh peas and so forth are more price elastic. Now, if there's more time available too to make a substitution, for the consumer to make a substitution, then the more elastic is the demand as well. So, you know, I keep talking about gasoline, but this is the ideal example. The price of gasoline doubles overnight. You're kind of probably stuck in a commuting pattern anyway. You might be able to call up a friend and say, hey, let's carpool this week, what have you. But for the most part, we are kind of stuck in these patterns in the short run. But if the price of gasoline is allowed to double, if we consider the doubling of the price of gasoline over a few weeks or a couple of months, a little longer period of time, and you'll see that people indeed will, over that period of time, they'll change their behavior. So gasoline, say, is more price elastic in the long term, in the long run, than in the short run. Okay, so over several weeks. So, you know, so these are things that I think are important to know that affect the price elasticity of demand. So here are your categories. You need to know these categories. Again, if E sub D is greater than 1, this is an elastic or relatively elastic good. It means that numerator in that fraction we were looking at is greater than the denominator. The numerator is the change in the percent change in the quantity demanded. So that is what's called a price elastic good. Now we're going to look at these last two columns in a minute. I just want to make sure we got the first three down. If it's equal to 1, the numerator and the denominator in that calculation are the same. If it's less than 1, we talk about a price inelastic good. The quantity demanded changes by a smaller percentage than does the price. Okay, so I want to move on here, and I'm probably going to hope I don't cause a problem here in the doc cam, but I do want to do the next thing under the doc cam, so I'm keeping radar on our toes back there. So radar, if we can go to the doc cam here, I want to talk about how elasticity is related to a change in total revenue. This is the same demand curve I had last time, okay? I drew this line that connects 9 here and 9 here just to make things simple for us. This is the price axis and this is the quantity demanded axis. So you got these different points on here. Again, this demand schedule, I believe, is pictured on page, let me look here. Well, it's on page 122 of your text. So if we go to a price of $8, then, you know, that's sitting above, I'll just do kind of a little dash line here. That's sitting above here at the number 1 or 1,000 units. So I think I last time said this is the point 1,000, comma 8 or 8.0. So I'm using the horizontal variable and the vertical variable, even though really your independent variables here, right, for most of our consideration. So at any rate, we got all these points. Now, just look at this point a second. Maybe I drew it a little too far to the right, but this is simply saying the demand schedule, this is a demand curve. This is simply saying that when the price of this particular good is $8, there will be 1,000 units demanded in a period of time, in a year or whatever it is, or a week. Doesn't really matter. So when the price is 8, the quantity demanded is 1,000. Associated with that, there's something called a total revenue. Total revenue. I'm going to use TR because I'll be writing that a lot for short, abbreviation for total revenue. So it stands for Teddy Roosevelt or total revenue, doesn't matter. But the total revenue, okay, revenue on an income statement, this is the top line of an income statement. You hear people talk about what's the bottom line, okay? The bottom line is income, okay? So income, and there's different incomes, but income is revenue minus expenses, okay? And that gets you income. So it's what's left over after you pay, if you're a business owner, after you pay your expenses. Well, now what comes in is revenue, okay? So if this is a company here that sells widgets, have you heard that term? Just an amorphous, undefined thing, but it could be pairs of shoes or what have you. But at $8 a widget, they'll sell 1,000 of them in a month, whatever the period of time is. So the total revenue would be the price times the quantity, okay? So for instance here, the total revenue is the price times the quantity. So I'll just say here that this would be $8, that's the price, times 1,000 units. So it'll be $8,000. Okay, so that's the top line on the income statement. And then, okay, so you got to pay your expenses, you had somebody help you sell this stuff and so forth. So if you got anything left over, that's your income. The bottom line, what's the bottom line? That's what we really care about ultimately at the end of the day. But what I want you to see first here is that we can picture total revenue at any price. We can picture total revenue on this graph. Because what this value here is, always P times Q, is the value is the size of a rectangle that I can draw here, and that should be, those aren't parallel, it should be, but that I can draw to the price axis and the quantity axis off of this point here, 1,000, $8. Okay? So it's price times quantity is revenue. So length times width is the area of a rectangle. Okay? So the length is 8 and the width is 1,000. That should be easy enough. Now, do you see that if I want to know the total revenue at a lower price, say at $7, I can do the same trick, but I get a shorter, fatter rectangle, if you will. And here, total revenue, I should write TR, is price times quantity. So here price is $7, okay? $7 times 2,000 units, right? Because this comes down, so this is $14,000, okay? All right? Okay, now, I can play this trick all the way down here. Now, what I want you to see first off is, if I start with a high price, say 1 month, and I'm not going to get much revenue because nobody's going to buy at $9 a unit, but at $8 there'll be 1,000 sold. So say I'm going to lower my price. You see that the revenue goes up, obviously, and we see that change in revenue would be equal to the change in the size of those rectangles. Okay? So a couple questions I want us to think about here. First off, what is the maximum possible, given this demand curve, what is the maximum possible revenue for this firm in a month or whatever the period of time is? What is the maximum total revenue? Or how would you find that? Well, you'd look for the biggest rectangle you can inscribe within the demand curve. Be the biggest rectangle. So what you do is you take the midpoint between here and here. The midpoint between 0 and 9 is 4.5. So I'm just going to go from 4.5. I'm going to come over here, and then I'm going to go down to 4.5 because that's halfway here. Do you see that? I mean, I drew an easy demand curve here, but these rectangles change in their size, okay? This tall, skinny one has 8,000 square units, or corresponds to a revenue of $8,000. This next one here is 14,000. So, but when I come down here to the midpoint, I get the biggest total revenue curve possible. Okay? So maximum total revenue, TR max, if I want to write it that way, TR max, is equal to $4.50, okay, times the number of units, which would be 4.5 thousand, okay, 4,500 units, okay. This would be the maximum. So 4.5 times 4.5, and then in thousands of units. So I'm reaching for my handy dandy calculator here, but let me get that exactly. It's $20,250. Does that make sense? That's the maximum revenue. That would be the area of this thing here. Now, if you lower the price below that, maybe you can see, like, if I come all the way down here, I get a short, fat rectangle. But its area is not going to be as big as this one. Okay? The maximum total revenue here is about $20,000, $20,250. As from month to month, I lower my price, and if my goal is to maximize revenue. Now, generally, your book doesn't say much about this. Books usually just kind of skip over this. But usually, I mean, your main goal is to maximize income, not revenue. It's the bottom line. But generally, a lot of times those two kind of move together. So we maximize the top line at $4.50 per unit, and we'll sell 4,500 units, and the revenue will equal this big thing here. Okay, so if I start up here, say, with this rectangle, okay, and I lower the price, I get this rectangle. Just do this, kind of hash this out. And I see that the gain here, when I lower the price from 8 to 7, the gain is here, kind of this part, and the loss is up here. So I gain more than I lose to the area of that rectangle, right? I gain just, whoops, let me back off. I gain just a little bit more than I lose. And so that is to say then that when I lower the price, the total revenue goes up until I get to this point. And then when I lower the price, say let's come down here where I can kind of see what's going on. At a price of $2 a unit, I'll sell 7,000 units. I get this rectangle here. Here I'm really loading this thing up, but that's this rectangle. Okay? So I'm going to lose this. When I lower it down to 8, I'm going to L here and I'm going to G here. Okay? Same idea. And I'll show you a picture here in a minute on the slides, but I wanted to draw this in. Okay, so the gain here, when you lower the price, is less than the loss. So your total revenue is going to go back down. So you can and they calculate this for you, and so forth, in your book. Now, here's one thing I want to note then. Last time we noted, go back and look, but last time we noted that the midpoint on a demand curve corresponds to a price elasticity of 1. You have unit elasticity at that point. At a high price, the good's kind of looked at as a luxury. You can kind of think of it that way. All right, a higher proportion of your budget and so forth. So in this region, at high prices, the good is price elastic. We talked about this last time. And in this region, it's inelastic, okay? Okay, it's inelastic. So what I want you to see here, is that in the elastic region, or for elastic goods in general, a decrease in price will correspond to an increase in total revenue. Okay? A decrease in price made the rectangles get bigger. For an inelastic good, let me do it over here, a decrease in price made the rectangles get smaller. Okay? So a decrease in price gives you a smaller total revenue. Okay, is that something I want you to know? I want you to bury it in your head. And conversely, we talk about price increases and so forth. Now, you might be a little overwhelmed at this point, and that's okay. So let me give you an easy, cheesy way to remember this. All right? Okay? For inelastic, price inelastic, I'll just write elastic. For elastic goods, price and total revenue move together. Okay? For elastic goods, price and total revenue move in opposite directions, move oppositely. Okay? Once you got that down, you got it. So if I say there's a price increase for an elastic good, tell me what happens to total revenue. Boom, you can answer that. There's a price decrease for a price inelastic good. Tell me what happens to total revenue. Boom, you got it. Now I'm going to be asking you those questions on the exam. So I want you to have this kind of in your gut, okay? I want you to have this here, first off, is that for inelastic goods, these two things move together. For elastic goods, they move in opposite directions. All right, this explains a lot of things, and we'll talk about here in a minute. Why don't we put taxes on certain goods and excise taxes on certain goods and so forth. All right, but we'll come to that in just a minute. Now, so if I can, if I can go to the PowerPoint slides here, Radar, I would like to show this thing here. So they give you this little picture in your book. Now this is kind of robbed, okay, but it'll take me hours to make this a nice color like this. But what you see on the left is our demand schedule. And around the midpoint there, you have a unit elasticity. Now on the right, you have a total revenue curve, okay? What this function is, it tells you the total revenue on the vertical axis, not price, but total revenue, as a function of quantity demanded. So you have quantity here, just as you have quantity here, okay? So the horizontal axis is the same, but the vertical axis is different. We're measuring total revenue here. So basically the size of these rectangles, as you lower the price here, you'll be moving from right to left on this diagram. And conversely, if you raise the price, you'll be moving from left to right. Well, so I'm sorry here. If you go, let's just stay on the horizontal axis. Let me say it right, okay? Because I think my brain drifted a bit. If you move left to right here, you're moving left to right here. But if you start here, you got small revenue way up here at this point. But as the quantity demanded increases, the price falls, total revenue goes up. And so that's tracing out this curve, this part of the curve. Until you get right here, when there's 4.5 thousand units demanded, that corresponds to this point right here. And then that's when total revenue achieves a max. Then it starts to go back down, okay? So this total revenue curve is going to be a parabola like this. It achieves a maximum, it achieves a maximum here at the quantity corresponding to the midpoint here on the horizontal axis. So this is a total revenue. So, you know, you know, there are instances, well, I guess I'll just give you an example here. When we talk about the price of, well, talk about the federal government putting an excise tax on cigarettes. Okay, that's a good example there. Because cigarettes we saw as a price inelastic good. Let's just go back to that chart. Boom, 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 boom. You'll see cigarettes on the left right here. 0.25, very price inelastic. Why? Because, boom, right there. If you're a smoker, there aren't any substitutes. There aren't very many. You got to have it, okay? It may be a high proportion of your income, but you got to have it. Okay, so cigarettes is price inelastic, okay? So why don't we put these excise taxes on cigarettes? So when I talk about excise tax, what I mean by this is, I haven't looked at a pack of cigarettes in a while, but there's little stamps a lot of times and so forth on cigarettes, and it depends on where you buy the cigarettes and so forth, what you'll see some taxes applied to cigarettes. Those are called excise taxes. An excise tax is a per unit tax. It's different than an ad valorem tax, like sales tax, which is a percentage tax. So generally speaking, there's two types of taxes, okay? Excise is per unit. Ad valorem, you've heard of that probably, we'll come back to that, is a percentage tax. So they have so many cents per pack. Taxes go to the federal government. They slap those on cigarettes. They also slap that on gasoline. Now, I misspoke the other day. I was watching a video, and there's not, I don't know, there's state by state excise tax on gasoline. Not at the federal level, but at the state level, at least for the most part. In Oklahoma, there's about a 20-cent tax per gallon on gasoline. It's an excise tax. It's the motor fuel tax. Gasoline's a lot like cigarettes. You got to have it, okay? The government slaps taxes on cigarettes and gasoline for a reason, okay? Because they're price inelastic. So think about this a second. Or alcoholic beverages, same thing. You think about those three classes of goods for a moment. Those are things that if you're hooked on gasoline or you're hooked on alcohol, it's like you got to have it. So government's going to put a tax on it. Why? Because they know those, since those are price inelastic goods, consumer behavior is not going to be affected much by the tax. That is to say, they put these taxes on a gasoline and so forth, people are still going to buy this stuff. and it's going to generate a lot of revenue for the government, whatever level, federal, state it might be. Now, for a price elastic good, I mean, they're not going to slap an excise tax on T-bone steak, okay, or caviar, okay, or so forth, because they know if they do, people quit buying this stuff, right? So again, the idea here is it's because of the price elasticity of demand you see those things. And what happens is just because the price of a good goes up a little bit, people will still buy it. That means they'll buy maybe a few less units, but the percent change in the quantity demanded will exceed the percent decrease in the price. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The percent decrease in the quantity demanded will be exceeded by the percent increase in the price. So you'll just move up this total revenue curve. So think about that a second. This is kind of common sense, kind of think about it. But when you go back to this definition right here, slap a tax on cigarettes, that is not going to, I mean, because this is a small number for cigarettes, then the percentage change in the quantity demanded is not going to be affected that much as the tax will affect the percent change in the price. So people will pay the higher price for 95%, say, as much of a good that they purchased previously. So if the price goes up because of the tax by 10%, people will buy fewer, but maybe only 5% fewer. Does that make sense? Because it's a price inelastic good. So in that case, the percent increase in the price exceeds the percent decrease in the quantity demanded. I think that through a little bit there, but for certain goods, you're going to have this thing going on. Another thing that's interesting related to total revenue and taxes, if you will, is the following. So I'm going to go back here, Radar. I'm going to go back to the document camera. So I'm jumping back and forth, but I got another example for us to think about here just a little bit. Let's see, I got a little graph here I started to draw. Okay, so I want to talk here just about, just a moment, about illegal drug enforcement, okay? This, so, you know, whenever, say, the federal government's stepping up its effort, by the way, I'm not trying to be political here. This is a standard economic argument I'm about to show you. This was first recognized, as far as I know, by William F. Buckley, who was kind of the father of modern conservatism. He's back in the 50s and so forth. He died maybe in the 90s, but he may have lived that long. I remember when I was young. Very famous economist, very conservative, but he noted the following. So the result I'm about to show you, you may think, would not ever be advanced by a conservative, though he was a conservative. He was saying sometimes drug enforcement, that is outlawing drugs or enforcing the laws against drugs, illegal drugs. You know, there's an effort right now from the Trump administration to interdict drugs coming into the U.S. from, I mean, they've seized a couple of vessels coming out of Venezuela and so forth. Okay, to stop that. Okay, so here's it. Let me ask you something, a couple things. When the federal government gets involved in interdicting drugs, does it make sense, first off, that the supply of drugs is going to decrease? I want to draw an arrow like this. We're talking about, maybe this is fentanyl, but I'm just going to say it's an illegal drug. And, of course, you got price here and you got quantity here. And like any good, like the market for any good, you got a supply and demand curve. So if you enforce laws against the incoming drugs, then that's going to shift the supply curve to the left. That should make sense. And so what's that going to do to the price of drugs that people do buy on the street? Would the price of drugs go up or down because Okay, it's going to go up because of drug enforcement. It's going to go up. So what you see is that if this is the demand for illegal drugs, then what you see is that this equilibrium point shifts from here to here. All right? So it shifts this way. All right, so first off, the price goes up. Now, I think everybody would recognize that. Everybody would recognize this. Now, it's pretty well recognized that I'm going to just write the fact here, that the amount of crime is a function of the revenue going into the industry, whatever the activity is. So if this is methamphetamines or what have you, then if the revenue that goes to the drug lords goes up, if the revenue goes up, their top line goes up for those in business, then they can afford speedboats and radar detection equipment and all these things. They can get more sophisticated about evading the government. So if revenue goes up, okay, if revenue goes up, the amount of crime a lot of times will go up. The amount of drug trafficking will go up if revenue to drug traffickers is increased. You might think about that a little bit, but why is that? Okay, that's not maybe really obvious here, but I'll tell you why it is. It's because drugs are addictive. Okay? In other words, if there's fewer drugs on the street, maybe 10% fewer drugs on the street, people will have to pay a higher price for drugs. Guess what? They'll pay more than 10% to get the drugs, okay? Because they got to have it. It's a necessity. So you'll notice the way I drew this curve here. I drew it almost vertical. That is to suggest that the demand for drugs is very price inelastic. Price inelastic. And as we noted just a moment ago, that price and total revenue move together for inelastic goods, price inelastic. They move together. So if you cause an increase in the price of drugs because of drug enforcement, guess what? The top line on those income statements, not that they file their income statements publicly and so forth, report their income publicly, but the revenue going to drug traffickers increase. That is to say, this total revenue curve here is going to increase. Okay, this revenue triangle rather, or rectangle, should get my words right, the rectangle gets bigger when you increase the price of illegal drugs due to enforcing laws against illegal drugs. And so you get kind of a perverse outcome here. Now, I'm not suggesting, because these things are true within limits, I'm not suggesting really that if we want to get rid of drugs, we should get rid of the DEA, okay, drug enforcement. I mean, you could carry this to an extreme, and then, but there is an argument, and this has been advanced for certain classes of drugs and so forth. I don't know a whole lot about drugs, but this is one argument in favor of legalizing marijuana, has been. Recreational marijuana. I'm not taking a position on it, okay? I'm just saying that if you're in a state where they try to chase down people who grow pot and so forth and trade pot, guess what? That raises the revenue to that industry. And if you have more revenue, you're going to have more criminal activity. So I mentioned William F. Buckley just a moment ago, WFB, very famous, kind of father of modern conservatism. He's kind of one of three. He's even before Barry Goldwater, who was before Ronald Reagan, who was before Patrick Buchanan, and so forth, just to say that it was kind of shocking to people when he, as a social and fiscal conservative, said, you know what? Maybe there are instances where it doesn't really make sense for us to enforce drugs against some of these addictive drugs. Okay, let's go ahead and legalize them. And I think he was in favor at some point of legalizing marijuana. And he based it on this very economic argument. He said, you know, we're just driving up revenues to the drug industry. That's all we're doing, and they're getting filthy rich, and they're buying, and along the way they're getting more sophisticated, they're buying more equipment and so forth to ply their trade. So, you know, I wanted you to see that because there is this relationship between the elasticity of the good itself and whether prices and total revenues move together or opposite of each other. And certainly when you're talking about narcotics, people will pay the higher price. We all know that. So much so that they drive up the revenue that goes to the drug cartels and so forth. So just something to think about, okay? Sometimes, you know, things aren't maybe at first blush as intuitive as you might think. It's almost as if, well, everybody knows that we need to, if we want fewer drugs, and notice the quantity goes down. I'm not saying that the quantity, I've got to be careful here. I'm not saying that the quantity of drugs has been in any way but adversely affected by this leftward shift in the supply curve. There's fewer drugs on the street. Yes, that's true. Fewer drugs on the street. Boom to boom, okay? But the money going into the cartels goes up, okay? And with that, the crime associated with it goes up, okay? All the other things, you're going to get more murders and so forth. And there's certain areas, I hate to say it, but in Mexico I don't really want to go. Used to would want to go and so forth, but don't walk too far away from the beach in Acapulco. I mean, it's pretty well known. You know, the drug lords are ruling some of that. And it's because the revenue's coming in to those folks. So crime is a function of revenue, not the quantity, but of revenue that's going into the industry itself. Okay, so if we can go back to the slides here, let me just kind of scoot through this just a little bit. Again, elastic means that the quantity demanded is sensitive to price changes. And inelastic means that the quantity demanded is not sensitive. Okay, and we looked at this midpoint formula last time. You should be able to use this, okay, in the homework. And, you know, I've heard a couple of y'all talking about this in the homework. Using this formula, make sure, you know, it's the change in quantity on the numerator and the change in prices in the denominator. So make sure you can do that. If you have any trouble with that, let me know. Here are the different categories. Again, price inelastic demand when E sub D is 0. You're talking about not only narcotics, really it's very close to this as cigarettes and so forth, but insulin, okay? I keep going back to that, but that's the classic, perfectly inelastic good, price inelastic good. Elastic good luxuries, caviar, okay? And here we have these. So we see that, as I mentioned here, total revenue is price times quantity. There's this total revenue test that we can employ to determine whether a good is price elastic or price inelastic. For elastic, price elastic goods, P and TR move in opposite directions, as we noted. For inelastic demand, price and total revenue move in the same direction. Okay. For unit elastic, total revenue does not change when price changes. So when we go here, and again, you've got this in your text and so forth, but here's the very demand curve we were looking at. I remember last time we computed this price elasticity and this one down here, 0.38 and so forth. But we were going along this curve right here and computing price elasticities at these different points. So again, you know, you should be able to compute these elasticity coefficients. You'll have, I think you will have for Unit 2 at least, you'll have a table like this to fill out. So the total revenue is the product of price times quantity. And you see here price, or the total revenue goes up when you lower the price. The total revenue goes up when in the elastic region, okay? And then when you continue to lower the price, lower the prices over here, and therefore increase the quantity in the inelastic region, which is over here, then total revenue goes down. So we see this again in this chart here, okay? So spend a little time. I hope that's pretty obvious. Here's the results here then. Okay, so if the price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, total revenue across the top here will decrease when there is a decrease, an increase in the price. So this is the impact of a price increase. Total revenue goes down. So I could ask you anything about these 6 cells here. There's 6 different questions. So don't get hung up on trying to remember, these different cases. Just remember, inelastic goods, price and total revenue move together. Elastic goods, they move oppositely. So if we go down to the bottom here, this is an inelastic good. If there's, over here in the bottom right, if there's a price decrease, total revenue decreases because, again, price and total revenue move together for price inelastic goods. Any questions on that? So all these things like what impinges on price elasticity of demand, and then the price change itself, how does that affect total revenue? They're all related by what we noted here. And that'll vary depending on what particular goods you're looking at. And again, these price elasticities are also affected by the time allowed for substitution. Okay, so I don't know where gasoline is. I keep going there. But even cigarettes, okay? If the price of cigarettes went up tenfold, it might be that people still buy cigarettes for a little while, but if they got enough time to find something else to fill the void in their lives, they will. I'll guarantee you, okay? So, cigarettes are more price elastic over the long run than over the short run. All of these things, I think, are things you kind of know, you have an intuitive feel for, but perhaps the value in what we're doing today is we're putting some structure to what you already know. It's kind of common sense. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. But we're putting it all together. We're ordering what you know. And one of my, ideal teachers in history was Socrates, okay? The Socratic method is hopefully we're employing that just a little bit today. I mean, I look at myself sometimes just as the handmaiden of knowledge, okay? Is to help you discover things, but a lot of times you're discovering things you already have an innate feel for. It's just kind of connecting the dots. So this is one of those things, I think. So, they talk here about excise taxes here applied to inelastic goods. We talk about decriminalization of illegal drugs. So there's a discussion of that. I kind of skipped over this, but there's a discussion in your book about how a large crop yield can force crop prices down for farmers. They want high prices, right? But, if it's a great year, bumper crop, the farm next door, they got all kinds of corn. You got corn. Everybody's got corn. Price of corn is going to go down. Then it says, then if the corn has an inelastic demand, whatever the good is, say corn. I like to use corn because there's corn-based ethanol and so forth. So many uses for corn, okay? Just so many uses for corn. So it's kind of like, uses for corn, not substitutes, but uses, okay? So it's an inelastic. There's always going to be a demand for corn, no matter what happens to the price. So it's an inelastic good. Bumper crop of corn, because it's inelastic, total revenue is going to move in the same direction as the price. So if the prices go down for corn, total revenue goes down to corn farmers. So this is what could be a bad situation, if you will, for those who grow corn because of something that at first glance sounded like a good thing. Oh, bumper crop. Yeah, but the price goes down. Yeah, but I got a lot more to sell. Yeah, but the price goes down enough, that total revenue goes down. I have a way, let me just say this, I may show you a little mnemonic trick next time also to remember what I told you. I think I'll skip that for now, but I may. But just remember, P and TR move together for inelastic goods. They move opposite of each other for elastic goods. Okay, so now let's go to price elasticity of supply, if there's no question on this. Okay. So, this is a topic we take up here on page 126 of your text, and what I've kind of promised here is this is the beginning of Unit 2. Okay? So in another 5 weeks or so, there'll be a Unit 2 exam. All right, price elasticity of supply. So I've got a slide here. The definition similar to the price elasticity of demand, but we got the subscript S here. So it's a percent change in quantity supplied of a product divided by the percent change in the product. Okay? So we're looking at how suppliers respond to a change in the price. So that's what we're doing here. If it's greater than 1, it's elastic. If it's between 0 and 1, it's price inelastic. Price elasticity of supply now instead of demand. Now, this formula here that fraction on the right could never be negative because the supply curve slopes upward, not downward like the demand curve. So as you increase the price of a good, you increase the quantity supplied. They move in the same direction. Okay? Price and quantity supplied move in the same direction. So if the numerator is whatever the sign is on the numerator, you have the same sign on the denominator. So we still, though, we demark the possibilities for E sub S in the 2 regions. So we talk about elastic and talk about inelastic supply. So like the bottom one there, inelastic supply, producers are not as responsive to price changes. Now think just a moment, before we go into any more slides here, just think just a moment why for certain goods, if the price goes up, what suppliers will fill the market. For other goods, if the price goes up, well, it's going to be a while before there's an accompanying increase in quantity supplied, okay? I mean, if the price of a good goes up, there's going to be more supply eventually. But there's always a recognition or response lag here. It depends on the good itself. Okay? Now, what kind of things would affect that? What do you think, class? Like, for instance, the price of farmland goes up by 20%. Now, people can bring more farmland on and so forth. But do you think the quantity supplied of farmland is going to respond real quick to that? Okay. It will eventually, it'll respond to it somehow, okay? But guess what? They quit making farmland, right? I mean, you can clear some land, but there's only so much land out there, okay? Right? Hey, let me show you one. So it wouldn't be very responsive, right? The price elasticity of supply is small for the land and things that have a fixed quantity by nature. What about gold? Okay, think about gold a second. Now, gold is very volatile, its price. The price of gold may shoot up overnight because of political or economic instability. So the price of gold goes up. Like any commodity, there'll be more gold brought to the market. But, you know, there's only so much gold, right? Your book says, at any rate, when you read your book, they'll tell you how much gold there is in the world. It's been discovered. And this may be hard for you to believe, and I did the calculation again, but I already kind of knew the answer. The amount of gold in the world will fill 3, but not 4 Olympic swimming pools. Okay, it's not that much gold. There's some. I mean, an Olympic swimming pool is a lot. So if you start putting gold bars in there, I mean, you're going to get to Fort Knox at some point and so forth. But who knows how much gold's in Fort Knox anymore, right? But there's only so much. Okay, so if the price of gold goes up, the quantity delivered to market can respond a little bit, but not that much. So gold's another one. It's a finite resource. The ability to suppliers to bring additional gold to market is somewhat confined or constrained. So it's a price inelastic good. When I talk price elasticity of supply is small. Okay? So, when we talk about how suppliers respond to an increase in price, then there's a few other things, kind of the other side of the coin. Then from demanders, how do demanders respond? Suppliers have incentives that they respond to. They have constraints they have to work within that should be common sense to us as well. But one of those big factors is if the amount of stuff is kind of finite to begin with, then you got a problem, okay? The market, the supply can't respond very well. So if we go to the slides here again, okay, we're talking about sellers' response to a change in the supply of price, or change in price. Here are your categories. You can have a perfectly inelastic supply as well. There's a perfectly inelastic supply of commercial real estate in downtown San Francisco. Okay. I remember, y'all remember Gilligan's Island? I depart. You remember the show? And so Thurston Howell writes his will. He's giving everybody on the, he thinks he's going to die. He's going to give everybody something from his will. So he gives Gilligan or somebody 40 acres of land. This is all I get. Everybody else is getting high rises in Manhattan. He said, yeah, but that's 40 acres in downtown Denver. I remember that quite well. 40 acres in there's not much commercial real estate in the middle of some of these cities. So you're talking about a perfectly inelastic supply, okay? Go to New York City, you'll see the world's highest or tallest apartment complex, right? It's like one apartment on top of the other. It's near Central Park. I mean, it's the funniest looking building in the world. Okay, because you can't build horizontally, you have to build vertically. Another thing that impinges on this ability of suppliers to respond to change in price, that is the price elasticity of supply, is the time period. So you got time periods for buyers to respond, time periods for suppliers to respond. So we talk about first off, in economics, and now this is something we're going to be making use of later as well. There's a difference between the short run and the long run in particular. Okay, you might think of it this way. First off, the immediate market period. The immediate market period is the period during which there's no time to adjust output in response to change in price. Some industries may not have an immediate market period if they're able to store their product. But if you think of a perishable good, I think your book talks about someone who, tomato farmers, okay? Tomatoes are pretty perishable. So on Saturdays, maybe there's a farmer's market or something like that. Local farmers show up with their truckloads of tomatoes. Guess what? They got to sell them. They don't want to take those tomatoes back home. They got to sell them that day, okay? If they sell out of tomatoes, they can't bring any more to market. They have to go back home, load up the truck, and so forth. The idea is they're bringing to market a perishable good that's available kind of on a daily basis. So they don't really have time to adjust their supply. So there's lots of goods, especially when you talk about goods that have a short shelf life and so forth. There's just this immediate market period during which suppliers really can't change the quantities they deliver to market. Okay, so there's a scenario there. Now, if you got big refrigerators near the farmer's market, and so you can pull those out. In other words, if you have storage, that would affect it. But in our thought experiment here, we can envision a market where it would have an immediate period, a supply period. All right. So you can't change the quantity in the immediate market period. In the short run, you can to some extent. The short run means that there's enough time to adjust output by increasing or decreasing the variable inputs, but not the fixed inputs. In any production context, there's fixed inputs and there's variable inputs. So a farm, so you grow corn on a farm, okay? So I don't know, the short run, corn, it takes a little while to grow the stalk and so forth, but you might grow more this year than last year and so forth, because you might plant more seeds, grow more corn, plant more seeds, or you might employ more workers, okay? But now it takes a while to buy a new combine, all right? Okay? So there you got maybe variable inputs and fixed inputs. And variable inputs would be labor, some materials, and so forth. Fixed inputs take longer to adjust. And this is where you're talking about capital, like machinery and so forth. So in the short run, you can change some inputs, but not all inputs. In the long run, that's long enough to change everything. So you got a factory here that makes shirts. Okay, in the long run, you can double the size of the factory or bring a new factory online. That's called the long run. In the short run, you got to live with the size of the factory. So you might hire more workers to produce more shirts in a period of time. You might hire more workers, you might buy more material and so forth, but you can't change the floor space, okay, because you got to build a new building in that case. Now we're going to use this over and over again. We're going to be talking about production later on. The short run versus the long run in economics is not some arbitrary length of time, okay? Like it might be in some other field of study. You might say the short run is 3 years or 1 year. Long run is more than that. In economics, the short run is simply the length of time where some of your resources are variable or factors of production are variable. Some of your resources are variable, but not all. That's the short run. In the long run, all of your inputs are variable. Okay, so you got enough time to double the size of your factory or to buy a new combine or whatever. That's the long run. And I think it should make sense if you think about it here, that if you look at that supply curve, you'll see that in the immediate market period, it's vertical. That is to say, it's very price inelastic. If the demand curve shifts a little bit, the quantity delivered to the market's not going to change. This is like gold here. Why are gold prices so volatile? Is because there's a fixed quantity. So if the demand for gold moves back and forth, you're going to go up and down. Inelastic supply and demand curves, okay, are vertical. Okay, think about it. Elastic are more, you get more horizontal, kind of the way to think about it. All right, now there's a little more to it than that, but the more horizontal the particular curve, so here we have a more horizontal supply curve. So this is a more price elastic supply good. This is the short run. It's somewhat elastic in the this should say, I've got to fix that. I made a mistake there. Short run supply is somewhat elastic in the short run, okay? So I'll fix that. So when you move from the immediate market period to the short run, then it's like the curve, the supply curve gets a little more horizontal, lays down a little bit, okay? And so you see here that the same change in price now that we had before, will now affect a small quantity increase. There'll be more delivered to market. So in the short run, yes, you can hire more workers. You can use more materials, but you can't double the size of the factory. In the long run, notice what's happened to the supply curve here. It's more horizontal. It's more elastic. Same's true for demand, by the way. Demand will be kind of more elastic when you're talking about a horizontal demand curve. Just a moment ago when I drew that picture of drug interdiction, I drew that demand curve vertical because illegal drugs is a price inelastic good, okay? Very price inelastic. Well, that's more horizontal. Notice the same or a small change in price. Even a smaller change in price causes a bigger change in the quantity demanded, okay? A much bigger change in quantity demanded. Okay, so we see that certain goods here can be characterized by the ease of which suppliers can bring additional units to the market. Antiques and so forth are these. The ease is, we'll look at these different ones. I don't think we're going to have time today, but the ease with which suppliers have in bringing these goods to market is a function of the elasticity, okay? So it could be the length of time suppliers have to adjust their behavior. Or is there just a finite supply to start with, like antiques? There's, not too many Model Ts. It's kind of hard to come up with new ones, right? Very inelastic supply of antiques. Reproductions, though, of antiques, those are more knockoffs and so forth. Those are more elastic. Okay, I guess I'm up with time, so read on and we'll talk next time. We'll review next time, okay?